Once upon a time, there was a show called The Tim and Jim Show. And Tim and Jim were going to have a conversation with an amazing guest about the importance of stories to your brand. But first, Jim is going to introduce you to this amazing person. Jim, please take it away.
Yes, we're very excited to have my friend, Chad Illa-Peterson on. We met actually, what was it? I think 2 years ago, and really got to know Chad and his beautiful wife, Lainey, at the last Social Media Marketing World when they were wandering around looking for people to give them food on the floor of the Social Media Convention Center. And we did have pizza, and then we got to hang out, and it was fun watching the fire at the Social Media World or Week Lima in the what they call it, the hibachi place, when Margot Kelly started a fire. So Chad and I have had some good laughs. So Chad, we're so excited for you to be joining us today. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh my goodness, that was I hadn't thought about that. I got to make sure, and hopefully we'll talk about that later on. But I need to make sure I write that story down. That was fun. That was fun. Maybe we'll share it later. A little bit about myself. First of all, great job on the last name pronunciation. Most people say Illa-Peterson, but it is Illa-Peterson. My wife and I are a little unique in that when we got married, we took each other's last names. Mine was Peterson, hers was Ia. So appreciate that. One of the things I really stink at, I'm pretty decent with, the whole story thing, but just here's me. I struggle with that. Better question. What do you want to know?
Wow. Where did it all begin?
It was 1973, and my parents were celebrating Valentine's Day.
No, how did you actually? Well, I mean, it really leads into the first question. I mean, I know you were doing a lot more with ads, but what made you decide to go into stories? Because I know you're very talented when it comes to video and audio. In fact, that's probably one of the things people see the most, is you like to go around and capture moments in time.
So that's actually a big piece of how this kind of happened. So it's interesting. So as you were saying, you mentioned that, well, I know, you did things with ads, and you were kind of doing the ads thing, but that you did a lot with video and audio, and that's probably what a lot of people have seen you do. But the unique thing that really drove home that stories and the relationships that stories can build was the direction to go. One was my theater background, so I like to tell stories, right? I like to share those emotional connections with people. But this will be our third Social Media Marketing World Conference, right? And every year that we've been there, we've gotten to know more people. But at the end of the day, because with business, I had been like really busy, and I hadn't really pushed it or marketed it, tried to grow it, self-promote it or whatnot. Most people really didn't know what I did. Like, they really didn't know that my big background was Facebook ads, right? I'm in a chat group with 3 other people who are some of the biggest names you guys probably know in the Facebook ads community. And it's just the 4 of us in this little chat group, and because they know that I do it, but most people don't. And it was interesting to me at these conferences that we connected with all these people. We were invited to be parts of things, and people wanted to collaborate and work with us and do things, and they didn't even know what I did. And I realized that it was because they had just gotten to know us through the stories that we shared on our social media profiles, by being 100% open, completely raw and authentic. And because they just got to know us, they felt an emotional connection. And so they wanted to work with us. They wanted to do things with us. They wanted us to be on their live shows or whatever. And inevitably, every time, they'd say, "Oh, by the way, before you come on the show, what do you do?" So I realized there was a power there. And when I also noticed, hey, I'm not really marketing myself, I'm not marketing my business, I'm not pushing the Facebook ads thing and whatnot, I had to kind of dig deep and ask myself, why wasn't I doing it? And it's because I just wasn't passionate about it. It didn't light my fire. There's things about it I enjoy, but at the end of the day, it's the creative pieces, it's the learning more about people, it's helping them find their stories and sharing the emotional connections that really lit my fire. I know I've used that phrase, but that's really the best way to put
Is
it.
that a Doors song?
Doors.
I know I'm dating.
I thought you said Dora. I'm like, I know there's Come On Vamonos, everybody, let's go.
Dora, yes.
But you said Doors, okay.
Doors, come on, baby, light my fire.
Yeah. I was like, I don't think Dora sings that. Me in Spanish. So that's kind of, it kind of morphed. And then you mentioned the video stuff, and people see me walking around, and it was because I like to catch moments. And so all that together kind of is how we came up with the name, the Story Catcher. I think a lot of people know that I create a lot of GIFs from the video that we capture, and we just try to find those raw moments that really show people's personality in those GIFs. And it just kind of all just happened very organically.
Well, and I think, like one of the things, like people may not know the story, as we were talking earlier, behind the fedora is that you and Lainey, were aside from each other in Guys and Dolls, and that's how that started. And so one of the things that I definitely, by becoming friends with you, have noticed is you guys are very creative, for one, which fits very well into the stories. And I think you guys have that unique ability because you are very creative, and I admire you for that, because I don't know that I could be that creative. It would probably take a lot of training and therapy. And I think that that's one of the things that really captures, right, that catches our attention. No pun intended. So I think that's one of the things too, like just the stuff you guys did at Social Media Marketing World last year, right? You're entertaining people, and it makes them want to get to know you. And I think that's where so many people fall short when it comes to their social media. I mean, what do you think, Tim?
I think that's a great.
I didn't know him till 10 minutes ago.
But I think that's a great point about entertainment. I think that's going to be especially more important this year, as as brands evolve and as time goes on. In order to capture people's attention on social media, I think entertainment is going to become more important. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. Nobody binge watches, ads. Right? Or during the Super Bowl, right? It's the one time a year where people actually get together and they're like, I can't wait to see the commercials. The rest of the time, people, they're binge watching things that are entertaining, things that they like to watch. Even on YouTube, people go to YouTube, they search for things, how-tos and things that they want to learn, but they don't binge watch the how to learn and how to do things. They binge watch the quirky and the entertaining things. So capturing attention is going to be a big piece of it, I think, going forward. And then we've got to jump on board with that. And the biggest way to entertain and capture people's attention is through some type of story, and it has to be something that they can also relate to and get sucked into, and put themselves, as the character that they're seeing in the story. So we've got to do a better job with that. A great example for me, one of my favorite shows, and honestly, the fedora thing was already a fedora thing for me before I found this show. But like, I'm a huge Raymond Reddington fan. I don't know if you watched The Blacklist, but one of his big things is he's always in a fedora. So I watched that show, and he's like a good guy, but also a very bad guy, criminal guy. And I'm not, but I still can put myself in his place, and I'm like, yeah, I could be like that.
Right. So Tim, that actually leads really well into our second question.
Absolutely. And before we do that, we really want to thank everybody who's watching the show for being here. Let us know if you have any questions for Chad down in the comments. If you have any questions about storytelling for your brand or coffee. Anyway, nobody's going to understand that. But we want to thank Vicki O'Neill for watching over on LinkedIn. And George, thank you for the comment on my facial expressions during the show. That is, maybe you will make a GIF out of that and share that on social media. But I digress. Question number 2, Chad, are you ready?
Maybe.
All right. Well, anyway, so what do you see in the power of stories that can help small businesses and brands thrive?
Wow, that's a good question. For me, the biggest piece of stories where the power really comes from is the ability to connect on an emotional level, right? Most of the purchases, most of the decisions that we make at the end of the day are really based on the emotions that we're feeling. And so when a brand can tell a story and the people they're trying to reach can connect with that story, then the two become one, right? Not necessarily, in the marriage terms, but you become a fan. You're going to be loyal to them. You want to do business with them because you get them and they get you, or at least you think they get you. I think that's where the big power comes. The struggle for a lot of us is when we think about connecting with people on an emotional level and putting some type of emotion into our ads or our content, we immediately always think everything has to be funny. And it's deeper than that. So I think as brands can feel comfortable with being a little bit, do you remember a big thing years ago, and it still is, but we'd say, okay, your Instagram stories or whatever should be a moment where you can show behind the scenes and blah, 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 blah. And so people would start doing that, but it was still like staged, they would hide the mess, and their workplaces are always pristine or whatever, right? Like you see the hats behind me. If I turn this camera around, you would see an awesome air hockey table that's covered with just stuff that doesn't let us play air hockey on it, right? And you know what? People are going to connect to that because they're going to say, oh, wow, he's like me. He has clutter. He's got stuff going on. And now I become more approachable. So.
No, I think that's a great point about the fact that, yeah, we try to make everything look perfect as opposed to being real. And, I think the other piece of that, I think, is if you're going to tell the stories, is it's got to be consistent. And I think that's the other thing, right? If you're going to get into telling stories, you have to have some consistency because otherwise people will forget about you.
You mean as far as like consistently telling new stories?
Or continuing your story of like, what's next? Where are we going? And that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think one of the things that bugs me all the time is people will, and of course now they message me or they'll ask me, to help them. But you hear, you need to find your brand story. People always talk about, what's your brand story? And I'm like, what? Who has one story? Like, right. I'm 40 years old. I don't have one story. I am who I am today because of an accumulation of just all kinds of stories, all types of different experiences. And your brand and your business is exactly the same way. There's new stories that happen in your brand and your business every day, but we don't catch them. And that's one of the big things that I'm trying to focus on, is helping people to catch those moments that they happen all the time.
I see what you did there, story catcher.
You like that?
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think even like one of my favorite phrases is, it's a journey, not a destination. And really a journey is telling a story. We change our businesses. We change what we think is important. I mean, even the example of how you've evolved, right? You were originally much more focused on Facebook ads. Now you've evolved into stories. And so even there's a story behind that you mentioned to us earlier. And it makes people realize, right? We just didn't all get here overnight. I mean, Tim and I, in doing this show, right? It's been a story in and of itself, because we know we've come a long way, and just even how we do the show and how we're able to, attempt to bring stuff out of our guests like you, and which we appreciate the fact that you're joining us, because, not everybody can talk about stories like you can. And people are going to tell their stories differently. I mean, Tim's got quite this story. I love what he's starting to do with this, parents that are in business, the Family First show that he's doing. I think that one, it's brave that he's out there doing that, and but I think he's doing a great job with that.
Yeah, there's no doubt that stories take guts. So hats off, to Tim.
So, Chad, what do you think a business or brand should do to create its story? I mean, because they haven't started yet. I mean, it's better to read a book or started to read a book recently, right? Start ugly, like just get started. What do you think they should do?
Yeah, that's definitely the first thing is just get the fingers on the keyboard and the pen on the paper. Where I think we mess up is, for example, earlier, right? You mentioned the napkin on fire, right? I've got to make sure, I've got the whole ADD thing, right? Things going on, and when we're done, if I don't take a moment and write that down, it's going to disappear again until, for some weird reason, it gets brought back up or something triggers a memory, right? You've ever been just sitting on the couch and for some reason you remember something from 20 years ago and I don't even know why, but you suddenly remember this moment or this experience, and we freak out about it, or we tell somebody in that moment, but then we don't write it down so that we don't lose that memory again. So I think one of the big things businesses and brands and personal brands and whoever you are need to do is get in the habit of, on your phone or a journal, at least at the end of the day, just jot down. I'm not saying you have to write the whole story out, but just jot down a moment or two or whatever may have happened that day where something changed, something affected you. There was a moment, and just put a few notes down, and then later, when the time is right, if it looks like, that there really is a story there, or there's a message or something that can be taught or shared with my customers, my audience, then craft it and turn it into the story. But I think that the first thing you need to do is just start catching those moments so that they're not lost.
Yeah,
Right.
Chad, how would you say, in terms of when people catch these moments, how do you decide if these moments are appropriate to share, as your brand or as your personal brand, online?
That's a really good question. That's gonna, you say appropriate. Everybody's audience is different. Things that they're gonna find appropriate or inappropriate are going to vary. Case in point, Super Bowl halftime show, right? That was all over the board. Or if they're relevant, I think is another word, right? The truth is, what really makes a good story is that there is a character. A lot of people call it the hero, right? Or somebody that your audience can relate to is probably a better description, right? Because you want them to be reading the story and be able to see themselves in this position. Not necessarily meaning that they're going through the exact experience, but the feelings and the struggle, the emotion that's involved in whatever's going on, they can relate to, right? If it's a story about somebody with kids, maybe they didn't go through that exact experience, but they're a parent or they were a kid, so they can relate a little bit. So I think that's a big piece. The other is there has to be a moment in the story where something happened that changed your mindset. It changed your direction. It made you realize something about yourself or about your brand or whatnot, and then shows you or the hero or the character overcoming it, or maybe they fail, but they learn from their failure. So those are two big things. Somebody that you can relate to, and it's teaching a story that something happened. A lot of times people will tell a story and it sounds like they just got off vacation and they're sharing their travel log.
Right.
So we spent 4 weeks on the East Coast and did this big road trip, and then we went to Philadelphia, and then we saw the Liberty Bell, and then we left there and we did this, and then we did that, right? And then the people listening are like,
yeah, it basically sounds like somebody's personal Facebook newsfeed, right?
yeah, right. It's a great point. Except for there's some people who do a great job with their news feeds and they do share stories. You can tell usually if it's a travel log if you keep hearing the word "and" over and over and over, right? A really good story has a lot of buts in it. And I don't mean like people that you don't like. I mean like the word
right.
Okay. Although there's some good stories with a lot of buts in it. But it's those moments in the story where you think this is what's happening, and then but this happened instead, or this challenge arose. I was going to fail, but I overcame it by doing this. Our brand planned to go this direction, but this is what happened. So looking for those moments. So, but back to kind of your point about which stories are appropriate. You know, I share a story about snipe hunting when I was, 11 years old in Boy Scouts. At the end of the story, I found out about myself is that when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. If you're counting on me, I'm going to stick to the task no matter what, overcome the odds, and you can count on me, right? So is the story relevant to my audience? My guess is most of them haven't been on snipe hunts. Mostly because snipes weren't real.
You finally figured it out. Wait, don't give away that secret.
Right?
There's still people that need to go snipe hunting.
Yeah, I'm not going to share my Santa story. But the lesson, right, learned is, and so I think that's what a lot of us as brands, we think my story has to be about my product. It has to be about, if I'm a Facebook ads guy and my story that I'm sharing doesn't have Facebook ads in it, then it's not relevant. And that's malarkey. And that's where we screw up.
Well, and I enjoyed, Chad, when we were talking before we started the show, we were talking about Winnie the Pooh, right? How you get a lot of real life stuff out of Winnie the Pooh. You can bring him on screen. Hopefully Christopher Robin won't get mad at us. But I think there's a lot to that, right? That's a part of you. And you learn life lessons from people's stories. And to your point earlier, how do you move that forward in our journey? Winnie.
And we want to thank Laura O'Neill is watching over on LinkedIn. Chad, she says, Chad, I wish more people showed reality in stories, but my less than perfect photos get less traction. More than happy to share my mess behind the scenes to be authentic.
Look, a story and a photo are two different things. A photo can tell a story, but capturing a moment and a story in a photo, George Demanis, a friend of mine, and he does a lot of photography stuff. We're talking the other day about, that, and that a photo can tell a story. A lot of times the photo supports the story or helps somebody visualize what it was they were reading. I wouldn't worry too much about, my photos that aren't doctored up and perfect, or my less than perfect life photos don't do as well as my other ones, or is that what she said, right?
Yeah, she was making the point that she wished more people showed reality in their stories. She's more than happy to share her mess behind the scenes to be authentic.
Yeah.
And George really wanted you to show the air hockey table, but he'll have to just wait.
I will take a picture of the air hockey table, and I will post it on my the Story Catcher Facebook page when we're done. So you can see my stuffed possum. It's not a real possum, and not like taxidermy.
Right.
I was do a lot of theater, and I directed the Beverly Hillbillies on stage, and part of the gift the cast gave me was this, stuffed animal possum. We use it to put the kids to bed at night.
So Tim,
interesting story.
Would you like to ask the next question about stories?
Sure. So Chad, who are some examples of great storytelling brands that you admire?
Oh man, this is, you guys posted questions, and I saw this one, and I thought about it, and I was like, I don't know that I have any brands in particular that I just like gush over. I think I see a lot of brands. One of the mistakes sometimes they make is that the ad may tell a story, but at the end of it, I don't remember the brand also. I think one of the ones that does very, very well with it, though, I think Coke. I think Coca-Cola does a good job. If you watch the things that they do, and they tell stories in their ads, their moments, their share a Coke and a smile, or one of the iconic, Mean Joe Green ad, those stories that they do connect with you emotionally. You can usually relate to whatever's going on in the ad, but the people also at the same time, they do always have a Coke. Right. And what's great with their stories is the story's not about the Coke. The story's still about the people, the character.
Right.
But the tool that helps them come together as one, or overcome the crisis or whatever, is the Coke. Right? It's kind of like, I compare it to Star Wars, right? I love Star Wars. Growing up as a kid, seeing the old ones in the theater because I'm that old. But as brands, we tend to tell stories about our product, about our brand, about what we do, right? And people can't relate to your product. They can't relate to your brand. They relate to you and to the person. Nobody left Star Wars and said, when I grow up, I want to be the Force.
Right.
They want to be Luke Skywalker because they can relate to Luke Skywalker. They want to be Luke Skywalker, and they want to have the Force, but they relate to Luke. So you've got to find the Luke in your story and your brand, or whatever it is you sell, or whatever you're trying to do. That's the Force. So the story's about the character overcoming whatever they did with whatever it is you offer. And Coke does a good job with that.
That's a really good example. And in fact, it's funny. I don't know if you watch the series Mad Men, but at the end of the last season, it's kind of like the main character, like they design that whole Coca-Cola ad, or they infer that maybe he's the one that came up with, we want to give the world a Coke, and we still remember that to this day. That's probably one of the most famous ads of all time, and it makes us feel connected to Coca-Cola. And sometimes makes me feel guilty that I stopped drinking soda because, the world wants to give me a Coke and I can't have one.
Wow.
That was a deep one.
You're the reason we don't have peace in the land today. Like, obviously, like the Congress needs some Cokes, right?
Yes. Some of them do Coke, but a different type of Coke. So we can say that on our network. So
we can easily get off track
Is
here.
that appropriate?
Right. So Chad, what are your favorite tools or techniques for storytelling? And earlier, Lisa Spar asked, when we talk about stories, are we talking about Facebook stories? But I think that's just a piece of it. So
yeah. So I'm gonna get back to your question about tools, because we need to clarify what you mean then by tools. But because look, Facebook stories, Instagram stories, folks got to get it in their head that that's just something that Facebook decided to call that feature.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's a story. I've had plenty of people, hey, did you watch my story today? And then I go and it's just a link to their newest whatever, right? It's just spammy, blah, blah, blah. Here's what's going on. That's not a story. It's an Instagram story in that it's on Instagram stories, but it's not a story. So let's clarify that. I think that ruined the word for me. I think it really screwed a lot of people's heads up. Just because you posted it on stories doesn't mean it is a story.
Right.
So
right, and I like what Kelly Noble Mirabella says, right? Because you have the dots and the dashes if you're using the stories platform. It's like people just throw a bunch of stuff up, and it's like, do you actually think someone's going to go through all that when you've basically made 1 million posts in the stories platform? But you're right, they're still not stories. It's more like it's almost like a photo album sometimes. It's not a story, but that's a great point, Chad.
Yeah, when you do a story, this is my opinion on it, is if you do a story on Instagram or whatnot, if it's multiple 15-second segments, at the end of each 15-second segments, if something doesn't make me want to watch the next one, then the previous one sucked. So it shouldn't just be I recorded this long thing and then I let Instagram cut it. I think we use it as a crutch. I think each 15-second thing should be thought out. That's just my personal opinion on that. But as far as tools, so when you say tools, you mean tools for publishing and where to show them, or tools as in to help create and?
I mean, I think my thought is like I'm a company. I want to start telling stories. So like, yeah, should I just be using my phone, or should I actually have some sort of set up? I mean, are there apps that make it easier for me to capture stories? Because I know you have all kinds of tools at your disposal, Mr. Chad.
I personally don't think that there's one that's really better than the other. At the end of the day, the most important tool is right here and right here. If you don't write them down, if you don't catch them as they're happening, then you won't be able to craft them. So for me, my favorite tool for creating stories, honestly, is the Google spreadsheet that I keep, where I write them down every day. Where I have a list of hundreds of these moments in my life that I can craft into stories. And some of them I may look back and go, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's something I'll journal about or something later, but I don't know if there's really a story there. But for me, that's the biggest tool for me. Because when it's time to write a new story, I can go through it. You know what? That's a good story. And when I write them down, if in that particular moment, I kind of know what the moment or the lesson or what I think I want to use that story for, then I have a column where I'll put, integrity or fun or love or commitment or hard work or whatever, just to remind me kind of why I thought that would be a good story or might be a good teaching moment. So for me, that's honestly my favorite tool is the spreadsheet that I keep the list on. A second tool that I use or I like to do is just to set a timer for 5 or 10 minutes. I'll look around the room, find an object, and I'll make that the first word that I write down on a piece of paper, and I'll start the timer. And then, like, I'm looking at a trophy, right? And so I'd write trophy, the timer starts, trophy, and then I just make myself write for 5-10 minutes. Doesn't have to make sense. It can be gibberish, whatever, but I don't let the pen stop. And when I do that, I tend to come up with ideas, or a lot of times I remember things that I've forgotten, and that helps me catch some stories that maybe had slipped through the cracks from years ago. For example, the napkin catching on fire.
Right. And Lisa had a question. Are you blogging your stories at all? Or is that something you're considering doing?
Yeah, so that we rebranded. We talked about earlier that I spent years doing Facebook ads. So we just rebranded and did everything last month and launched the website. And if you go there, you'll see there's stories that say coming soon. And we will have a bunch of those blogs and those stories out before social media marketing world. That's the goal. So so that answers your question there.
Yes.
A lot of them are.
Yeah, and then Anita wants to know, do you think that storytelling is the same as copywriting?
No, I think they're related. There's moments in the sales funnel where, the story, the emotional connection is already there, but now you also have to close the sale. And I think people who do copywriting, especially in that particular way, that's another unique skill set to be able to get people then to take steps and commit to purchasing your product. So, copywriters do a lot of product descriptions and things, and that's not always necessarily a story. So the stories help build the relationship and take people down the funnel, and get them to relate and want to do things with you. But I think there's an overlap, but I think there's some different skill sets. I don't know that I would consider myself a copywriter. Probably why I didn't call the business story writer. Although I can, and people, have told me they like the things that I write, which by the end of the week, guys, we'll have those parts of the website running. But for me, that's why we went with Story Catcher, because for me, my particular skill set is more helping other people realize that there was a story there, pulling it out of you, helping you find those moments. That see, what happens is a lot of times, right, I'll talk to someone, I don't have stories, because we all live the same, 8 to 5 and dinner at night and Netflix and humdrum lives, and I don't have stories, because we read all these things, like I have the first 4 stories we have coming out, right, this week, that'll be on the now launched website. It began on a brick stage, or stage made of brick is the one that's called. The foiled pizza robbery is another one. The great snipe hunt is one of them. And my brain just decided to go blank on what the other one was, but they're all, you read them and you're going to be like, wow, I don't have stories like that. Those sound crazy. The foiled pizza robbery, what the heck was that about? Right? But they're just small moments that just happen in life, but they're just told as a story. And I captured them because I caught them because I wrote them down. And trust me, you have them. Everybody has stories. It's just that you call them life, and you don't think of them in that moment as a story. And so you've got to develop the ability to notice those moments and say, oh wait, but this could be a story. So
absolutely.
And you touched on this a little bit. Anita's asked, how do you create storytelling that closes sales right away? Or I don't even know. I mean, Tim, what do you think? Is that something we can really do? Or I mean, maybe for some people, but I feel like it's still, you got to build some of that know, like, and trust before I'm going to buy just because you told a story. I mean, what do you think?
He asked you, Tim.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say in most cases, it's going to take at least a few points of contact before somebody's going to buy from you. Now, depending on, if it's a product or a service that you need right away, or it's some sort of emergency service, you might need it sooner than later, depending on the brand. But I would say in most cases, it's probably going to take a number of points of contact online or in real life in order to build that know, like, and trust factor. What do you think, Chad? I'm sending it over to you.
There's so many different moments and so many different products. I mean, like, look, if you're in your car and you hear a story about a mouth-watering hamburger that changed somebody's life, and you're on the road and it's lunchtime, you may take the next exit and buy a hamburger.
Right.
So if the story is heard by you at the right moment, at the right time, then yeah, it might close a sale right away. I don't think that my particular service that I offer is going to be a one and done story. It's possible, but my guess is, even if I told the perfect story that made you say, I need this in my life, you're probably not going to go right to my sales page and purchase. You're probably going to go to the website and read some more. You may think about it. You may contact me. You may connect with me. There's just different moments in the sales funnel where I think different stories make sense. And it just depends on where that person is, on whether or not that story may convert them as a sale versus convert them as a believer or a follower. Look, for me, the greatest teacher the world has known, and the person who had the most followers, because we always talk about followers, and this is in no way to like be, we're going to now go to church, but to me, in the Bible, Jesus used stories, right? And he always had relatable characters that overcame things. And those stories turned into followers. Not always immediately. Right. So, some took a few stories and some took a little bit harder conversion funnel. But that was that was the primary tool for teaching and building a following, and closing a sale. So there's just going to be different moments. So everybody's unique. I'd be happy to talk to her and learn more about what she specifically is looking at. Maybe she has a product that she thinks she has a story about that is going to close a deal faster, and I have no doubt that that's very possible.
Right.
Yeah, those are some great points. And we want to thank Mary Brandt, who's watching over on LinkedIn. She says, hi, everyone. Lots of live shows today. I know she had a live show I was watching a few minutes ago. And Marissa Callie is watching. She says, what qualifies as a story? How many slides? I guess she's talking about maybe Instagram stories.
Yeah.
Or maybe she's doing a PowerPoint presentation. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, we have a bunch of people on LinkedIn, and we wish we could share your comments. But hi to Stefan Kaplan and to Melissa. Ooh. And also Kelly Knott. And Yeah, everybody's really enjoying what you've been sharing with us, Chad. Chad, what is the best way for people to get a hold of you?
They can contact me through the website, thestorycatcher.com. You can email me, chad@thestorycatcher.com. Facebook. I know the general rule and the best practice is to have the same username across social, but unfortunately, Storycatcher
Social didn't cooperate.
Yeah, so Facebook, if you look up the Storycatcher, will show up, but I think it's /catch your story is our Facebook. Instagram, I still think if you search the Storycatcher, we show up, but it's _story_catcher. But if you search for us, you'll find us. Message me. You have a story? Send it to me. I'm happy to, I always ask people, hey, send me a story. I'll look at it. I'll give you some, a little bit of free feedback. And if you like what we discussed and we want to do something, we can, whatever. But I like to read stories. I like to share my stories, but I love seeing other people's eyes light up when they realize that we found one of their stories. I love that because for me, it's an emotional connection too, because they're getting very intimate and sharing a piece of them with me that's not even crafted. It's very, very raw. And when I can talk to someone and catch them in that very raw moment, I can really find where the emotion is. And when we can find that, we can put it into a story where other people are going to feel it. So yeah, find me, contact me, stalk me, whatever. We've got lots of windows. We keep the blinds open. We're an open book here.
Speaking of that, Chad, how is your community recovering from the explosion that you guys had down there?
There's still a lot of legal things going on. We had a lot of friends that had garage doors and windows blown in, support beams cracked. They evacuated a 4-mile radius, and we literally lived at the 4-mile mark. So we were gone for a day, but people who lived closer, especially within a mile, had a lot of damage to their house, and that's just brutal. We had hurricane, and then we had a year off, then we had another one, both with major flooding, and then less than a year later the explosion. So it's a fun place to live. There's homes for sale.
Right.
Come on down.
Well, Chad, thank you so much for joining us. And Tim, who do we have coming next week?
Next week, we have Kate Chernus with Lately. Lately is a tool that uses AI to help us create social media posts more easily. But I'm sure we will learn much more next week about Lately and the intersection of AI and social media and all those wonderful things. So yeah, we're excited to have Kate on and learn more. So
and Tim, Tim, you have a show coming up soon too, don't you?
I do, on Thursday night. Oh, that's tomorrow. Tomorrow night, my guest is Brian Schulman of Voice Your Vibe. On the Family First show, we'll be talking about how he juggles work and life with his, I believe he calls his children monkeys. So that should be a fun show.
Thank you again, Chad. Thank you everyone that joined us on all the socials, as we like to say. And we will see you guys next week. And Chad, we will see you in a few weeks in hopefully sunny San Diego.
I'm looking forward to it. And, let's find some time and let's catch a couple stories.
Yeah, sounds good.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.